You're about to enter into a new world of knowledge, curiosities, and high strangeness. This is a podcast of Straight Up Strange Productions.
You're listening to Mysteries and Monsters. I'm your host, Paul Bestall. This week I'm joined by the Reverend Aylyson Dunlop-Shanes to discuss the contents of her new book, Mystic Visions. Alyson has always been connected to other realms, whether she realised it or not, throughout her life. A journey that began through the family's connection to the world of spiritualism has guided her through her life amongst many challenging experiences. In this latest book, Alyson highlights some of the extraordinary experiences her life has presented and challenged her with along the way. We discuss some of these experiences throughout her life, from precognition, exorcism, strange experiences, and many more. A big thank you to the Reverend for joining me on this week's show. But before that, as always, don't forget you can support Mysteries and Monsters by signing up at patreon.com/mysteriesandmonsters. $4 a month gets you ad-free episodes, guaranteed early releases, bonus content, and more. A big thank you to my latest patron, Rebecca, and to each and every one of you that continue to support me in the show. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can find Mysteries and Monsters across all social media platforms. Please subscribe to the Mysteries and Monsters channel on YouTube. You can also visit mysteriesandmonsters.com for news, episodes, and more. Our brand new merchandise store is now available directly through TeePublic, so please visit them, and you can click on the link in the show notes as well. Our intro and outro music are performed by the marvellous Weary Pines. Thank you as always to Dean Bestall for his marvellous artwork. The show is produced by Brennan Storr of the Ghost Story Guys, and Mysteries and Monsters is delighted to be a part of the Straight Up Strange network. Now, let us join the Reverend Aylyson Dunlop-Shanes as we delve into her strange and mysterious life in her book, Mystic Visions. The Reverend Aylyson Dunlop-Shanes has always been connected to other realms, whether she realised it or not, a journey that began via spiritualism into finding her modern spiritual place in this world. In her latest book, Alyson highlights some of the extraordinary experiences her life had presented and challenged her with. Alyson, welcome to Mysteries and Monsters for the first time.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's a delight to be here.
No, it's a pleasure to finally speak to you. As I was saying before we started, when I was preambling before and we were dealing with some interesting acoustic interruptions.
From the neighbours, yes.
You're someone I feel like I've known for quite a long time, which is always one of those strange things about working in the world of the 40, and I think that so many of our paths cross without us actually speaking or realising it sometimes.
That's right. We've got so many people in common too. We've got like all the same friends, but we've never, or we've maybe spoken on Facebook as well. We've commented maybe on each other's posts, and you only know somebody by their name, don't you, on Facebook sometimes, not by their face. You maybe don't look at the photo. But it's great to connect with you and have a chat with you.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm always interested when I see a book like this, because I find it's very interesting for a lot of people these days that I think sometimes until you take stock of your life and look backwards, sometimes you don't realise how many strange incidents and occurrences and experiences you may have had. And I think for someone such as yourself, Alyson, as a well-known speaker in the Scottish paranormal scene, and as well as delving into ufology and obviously some of the assistance that you've offered through religious matters across your career, is it sometimes surprising when you take stock now after the book's been released and you look back and you think, well, actually, I've had a pretty spooky life?
Definitely. In shows and in conferences, I've maybe given out bits and pieces of my experiences, but when you actually list it all in a book, you realise just how many that there have been. And it kind of hits you that, as you say, I have had a spooky life. And then after the book was published, I would still think, oh, I forgot to put that in the book. Why didn't I remember to put that in the book? Or somebody will ask you, what was, your first experience? And you'll say, oh, it was this. And then you go away and you think, no, actually, there was another one and I forgot to tell them about it, and I think just because there have been so many, but they've all been quite well spaced out, and some of them are maybe sort of less spooky than others. There's like, when I was very young, I was maybe about 10, and heard breathing coming from an old mirror. It was a wedding photograph of my grandparents that had been, it was within a mirror. It's very pretty. I don't know if you've ever seen them. There's not many of them about, I don't think. And I was standing, now it wasn't my own breathing that I was hearing, but I could hear somebody, and I also lived in a Victorian house at the time. And I heard somebody coming close to me, and I could just hear them breathing softly in my ear. And I flew down the stairs. Absolutely flew down the stairs. And that's probably the first thing that I think I can remember, really. But it's quite a small incident in comparison to something like later, like in my late 20s, the incubus attack, which was quite the experience, or the Palladian communication, which again was quite a profound experience. So some things are less memorable than others when you're talking, in the moment, and it can, things sometimes slip your mind. But there's been a lot.
I'm quite surprised when I've looked at the book and I've looked back at how you grew up, Alyson. Excuse me if this may sound like I'm being churlish, but I'm quite surprised to see that you've ended up as a member of the church rather than continuing what would seem to have been a family tradition in working in the spiritualist church. And I think when we sometimes look back at our upbringings, there's a lot of supernatural things that seem to go on around us that perhaps we're too young to understand, or as you refer to, some members of your family just didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it obviously was something that was very deep-seated as a traditional way of connecting, and for your family to seek solace in the other side, it would seem. So was that, I suppose, for people like ourselves, when we've got that kind of experience and these kind of outwardly pressures that are around us from family members, do you think it's the kind of thing that it was always going to take you on a spiritual path, but not necessarily into the spiritualist church, it would seem?
Yeah, I think you've just, said that exquisitely. That is exactly it. I'm not saying that this won't change at some point, but this seems to be the path that I'm on, that I've been guided to be on. And although our family, some of the family were spiritualists, like my great-grandmother, and my grandmother used to go to the spiritualist church with her. But her son, my grandfather, he didn't, and he wasn't interested in doing that. And now, although my grandmother did go to the spiritualist church with her mother, as I think a lot of people, regardless of what religion they're in, they sometimes go to the spiritualist church because they're seeking comfort. They're seeking a message from a loved one who's passed on. And spiritualism welcomes everyone of every religion. So my grandmother was actually brought up Baptist, and then Church of Scotland. And I was brought up in the Church of Scotland. It wasn't forced on me, it wasn't like you had to go to Sunday school, or you had to go to church every Sunday. It was nothing like that. And the other side of the family, they're Church of Scotland as well. So they're actually primarily Church of Scotland, but with, I guess, a hint of spiritualism there. Sort of just thrown in for good measure. But I would say that all my family were very open-minded about the paranormal, about the supernatural world. I said in my book that one of the first things that happened really was that my grandfather, when I was 14, gave me unknowingly to him the book The Exorcist. He handed me it, and that, to me, when I look back, he put me on my path. I think, I think he did. I think, although, and I don't remember even being frightened reading it. I mean, I think it just opened my eyes to this thing, but I also think that maybe I viewed it as a work of fiction without realising that these events did actually happen to someone, not a girl, but a boy.
Yeah.
And that this thing was a real thing. It did happen to people. So I didn't really take that so much on board. When I read it, I just viewed it as a work of fiction, and I think I had a strong stamina for horror from an early age as well. I mean, I was watching American Werewolf in London when I was 12 and things. But it was mostly Hammer. It was mostly the Hammer horror type stuff. But I think it's interesting that was the book that my grandfather gave me. He would have been horrified to know what he had given me. He really would be absolutely horrified to know. But I do think that it was a sign, just a almost precognitive. Now, my grandfather actually did have precognition. He did. It usually came to him in dreams. He dreamt of a jockey that was going to win a horse race. Yeah. And he knew the name of the jockey, he knew the name of the horse, and when he saw it, we were at a race meeting, which now firmly into animal rights and don't believe in that sort of thing. But we were at a race meeting. My family did enjoy going to the races, and we all put money on it, and we all won. Because when he saw it, he said, "Oh my, that's what I dreamt. That's the jockey that I dreamt about. And he was on that horse. Yeah. That's the name of the horse." And but a lot of his dreams he wouldn't talk about. He wouldn't tell us about. But he did have precognition. So whether or not there was something there, from him, and I also wonder whether that's the inkling that I have of when I have dreams or visions of things that are going to happen. I really hope that the visions that I've had are now in the past. The Paris attacks and the Twin Towers primarily.
Yeah, I was going to say precognition's a strange thing, Alyson, because I think, as you refer to there, with having dreams about such terrifying things, I think often the thing that troubles us a lot is that we're stuck with them because they're not really the kind of thing you share, or if you do have a trusted confidant or someone that you can share such things with, often they'll just try and brush it off and perhaps be quite flippant about it and suggest you don't eat enough cheese before bedtime or something like that. And I think it's only when you start to have things, and as you refer to there, it's strange how some people have such dreams or precognition and either don't try to talk about it or just push it away because it's almost as if it frightens them and they don't want to face up to the realisation that they are having these strange ideas from wherever they come from pop into their heads. And as you say, quite lightheartedly about the jockey story, I had a very similar strange feeling. It wasn't a precognition. I remember several years ago during the 1998 World Cup, Alyson, and it was the final, France versus Brazil, and Brazil were heavy favourites. And I remember on the Friday before the game, I was walking down the street. I don't bet at all. And I saw a sign outside that said France to win 3-0, 33-1. And I just went, right, I'm going to put £20 on that. And I cannot tell you to this day why. that happened. And my friends have always laughed about it, who said it's the quietest they've ever seen me watching a game of football until the third goal went in, which was in the last minute. And I went mental. I went absolutely mental. I won £670 on a flippant thing. And I'm rubbish at betting. I could lose. I'm one of those people. You give me £1, I could end up losing a fiver. When it comes to football games, as much as I love the sport. So it's always little things like that, because I've never considered myself to have that kind of second sight, as it were. But it's always struck me as it was completely out of the blue. I didn't do it normally. I would never put that amount of money on, even if I was putting £20 on myself, Alyson. I'd be looking for a condition to make sure I didn't lose any money on myself. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's always strikes me as peculiar that I can't tell you why I did it, and it just happened. And then the week after, I would have done something. If I'd done it again the week after, I'd have lost £20. I know. I might as well have set fire to it for the use I was.
But you obviously knew, and you obviously were in that moment. You did have that ability, which proves to you that you could develop that ability, but it also proves that it is a real thing, and that at that moment you knew, or you wouldn't have done it. If you thought it was just something and nothing, you probably wouldn't have put £20 on, but somewhere inside you probably thought, that's significant. I think I will.
So how did you feel when you were, as you were saying, when you had those terrible precognitions about the attacks? I suppose it's one of those things that when they're always these kind of, there's something kind of sort of misty about them, isn't there? They don't exactly tell you where and when, but you kind of get a sort of, I suppose it's like a clip notes version of what's going on. So you'll see key aspects of it, and it's difficult to kind of put a place and time on it until you actually see the event, and then all of a sudden you get this very strange feeling. Well, I personal experiences when I've had strange, when you get a bad feeling about something, when you see what you've had a bad feeling about, and I've heard from other people, it's almost as like your insides freeze, because the realization is you're seeing what you thought you'd seen.
Yeah, it's like the blood just drains right out of you, and it's like, that the camera shot in Jaws, the famous camera shot in Jaws. It's like that, when you look at the screen and you're like seeing the horror of something that that you've seen. Now you know what it was about. And that's the thing. I didn't realise I was having visions. I knew that years before I had been told there would be something. I was told I had this information from somewhere about Paris and New York, but I didn't know when or where or what. And then when I started getting the visions, I didn't even realise that there were visions. I would just find myself staring into space and thinking thoughts, like, and just, like you let your mind wander and you daydream. But I would find that I had daydreamed about something like, really bizarre.
Yes. A
plane coming through my window, and I lived in a high-rise flat at the time.
Yeah.
And I would see the nose of a plane coming through the window, and I would just be watching it and thinking, that would be awful if that happened. I'd never survive. And the same would happen. I would be looking out over the city, because I had a great view from the 15th floor, and I'd be looking out over the city and I'd see other high rises, and I'd be thinking the same thoughts. They'd never survive if a plane went into them. And I could see, the plane get into it and thinking, that would be awful. And then I would stop myself again and think, why on earth are you thinking this? That's really a really bizarre thing to think about. Think about something cheery now,
Yes.
Stop thinking these ridiculous thoughts. So I just thought that they were ridiculous thoughts and daydreams, and didn't actually realise that what I was having was a precognition. And that was like only 3 months before 9/11 that those happened. The Paris attack, I then realised, because of what had happened in 9/11, And because it was New York, and I knew then that, something else could come up. And, I'd already said to somebody, Paris, years before, but in the moment, I didn't think Paris, despite the fact that there was 2 pictures of Paris right across from me when it happened, one the Eiffel Tower and one the Sacré-Cœur. But I'd seen this bullet-shaped bomb coming through the window, and again it was like that daydream. You're just seeing something happening. But I'd been to development circles in between times, so I at that point realised that I was seeing something. I was seeing some kind of vision here. And that's when, and I started seeing this domed city. Now, as I say, the Sacré-Cœur is domed, and that is probably what I was seeing, and it was right across from me, but I didn't put the 2 things together. I didn't, so it wasn't until the next day, because it was the next day it happened, that I realised what it was I had seen. And, I think, why didn't I put my brain into gear and realise what I was seeing there? And instead of just waiting for more information, I started putting my own thoughts into it. Is it this? Is it that? Is it the next thing? And you end up feeling like it doesn't really matter what you would have thought or done, you would have got it wrong anyway.
Yeah.
And who would you have told in any case, except somebody that, maybe a friend or something, but apart from that, what else do you do?
Well, absolutely.
Do you phone up the police and say, I've just had a daydream that something's going to happen in such and such a city? Get on the phone to Interpol, they're just going to think that you're nuts. And the thing is that you could very well be wrong too.
Yes.
So you could be wasting everybody's time.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's the double-edged sword about things such as this, Alyson.
Yeah.
And I've always been deeply interested in that kind of thought process that some people have. Ever since I came across the stories about what happened at Aberfan, and the fact that it led to the creation of what became known as the Premonitions Bureau, which was run, is it John Barker, I think it was?
Right.
Where he was basically so struck by some of these pictures and strange things that the kids had said on the run-up to the disaster, that he opened a telephone line for people to ring up and leave stories and say, well, I've had this dream, I've had this, like you say, this daydream about something. And they would keep a record, and therefore they had certain members of this bureau who got a better hit rate than the others. But it just shows you that, especially when you come to something that's very specific, because, when you hear stories like this, people go, oh, well, planes crash all the time. Well, they don't.
No,
and they certainly don't crash into buildings.
That's right.
Especially where we live in Europe, I can think of a handful, probably in the last 20 or 30 years, Alyson, of serious plane crashes we've had on the continent.
Yeah.
And that's covering the whole of Europe, and thinking of a couple of very strange experiences. I can only think of one off the top of my head, which was that terrible crash in Amsterdam, I think it was, where the plane hit a block of flats just outside of Schiphol Airport, I think it was. But even so, I think that's 20 odd years ago. These things don't happen. So when people have such dreams, and like you say, the other aspect, sadly, we've got these days, and I know this happened to one particular chap who had very similar dreams in America about planes crashing, is that the FBI started tailing him. Because they began to think, well, perhaps, because obviously in the 70s in America, there was a lot of skyjacking going on and a lot of people taking planes, and obviously they were still very upset that D.B. Cooper had escaped from their clutches with lots of money. And so he was ended up, rather than, he thought he was going to do the right thing, and he ended up becoming a figure of suspicion for them, because they thought it was a bit odd. And I suppose better the devil you know sometimes, like you say, because you've got this fear of, firstly, am I going to be believed? And secondly, well, if I am believed, is this going to come back to me somehow, even though I'm just trying to help?
Yeah, well, look what is it? Helen Duncan, the Scottish medium,
Yes.
who saw somebody was in her, wherever she did her church, and she was given a message to a mother and told this mother that I'm sorry, your son's just died. He's given me a message. He was on this boat, and it was this ship that had sank that nobody knew about. It was a secret sort of mission thing, and I can't remember all the details, I'm afraid, but and then she was arrested because they thought that she was a spy.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are obviously those kind of dangers that you're concerned about, but I don't know. I just wouldn't. You maybe just wouldn't know in time. There's also the danger of becoming obsessed by your every single thought.
Yes.
Every time you daydream, and I've met people like this, that they write down every single dream that they have. They write down every single thought that they have, and then they start ruminating about, disastrous things. And writing down every single sort of disastrous thing that they can think about. It's not really that they are being given an image and then they fit it to, I'm dreaming about a car crash, or I'm thinking about a car crash, and then they scan the newspapers and they find that there was a car crash in Turkey, right? Just pull somewhere out of the blue, and they match it up. They fit it to what That's not really precognition, but they've become obsessed by it. And it's taken over their lives.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen.
Yeah. Well, humans have an obsession to find patterns in anything, don't they, Alyson?
Yeah.
And so they will try and retrofit things to, well, it must mean this. It has to mean this. This is what it means. I mean, if I kept a journal of my dreams, there'd be some very strange things going on in the world if they were coming true. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I suppose as well, the fear of, as you say there, that some people can become obsessed. I suppose the other side of that is that you can fear having these again, because you're like, why on earth do I want to be a vessel for such imagery, really? Yeah. And you would, I suppose it's a double-edged sword. Some people become addicted to wanting to see more, and I would imagine others, and due to the experiences you probably had, Alyson, these are not things you want to repeat on a regular basis.
No, not if there's nothing that you can do about it, no. If I was able to, for example, help the police with, as some mediums do, help the police with murder investigations or something like that, that is not something that would bother me to do. It's not something I would be frightened to bother me, but it's not something that I would be frightened to do. I think this is another part of the path that I've been on in life, is to attempt anyway, and I'm not saying that I'm not frightened of some things, but to reject fear as much as possible. So when I was a hypnotherapist, I specialised in phobias, fears and phobias, and in particular animal phobias.
Yeah.
So I think that fears don't serve us at all. Unless, obviously, there's a snake in front of you and it's poisonous, you should be frightened.
Yes.
But I'm talking about irrational fear.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be rational for me to fear something like a precognitive dream or or some kind of like mediumistic ability to see a murderer and help the police solve a crime or something like that. That it wouldn't be rational for me to be fearful of that.
Yeah.
And it's also not, that's why I'm not bothered by horror films. It's not, for me, it's not rational for me to fear an image on a screen that's just fiction. It's just a story. So it's not rational for me to fear that. So I try to keep like that element of rationality about my life. I'm not saying that I'm rational about everything, but I think I try to do that. So I think that that's why I wouldn't find it fearful. But as you say, some people, and I can totally understand it, some people would be frightened of seeing things and experiencing things. And yes, I have had experiences like seeing the Pleiadians that was a really, or having an incubus attack that were strange and frightening experiences. But after that, I was also able to change if something frightening was happening. If I felt that I was under like demonic attack, for example, I was able to change that fear into another emotion, anger, and use that anger to forcefully reject that demonic attack. You know, we don't have to live in fear. Mm. We don't have to, and we have every right, you know, righteous anger. We have every right to be angry at an evil spirit who is trying to invade our space. You know, is trying to kill us or suck our life energy out of us, or whatever it's trying to do. We've got every right to be angry at that, and we don't have to fear it. And you can change that. You can change that, you know, in the moment. You can change that. It took me many years actually to realise that, to flip that switch. And I realised that I was much, much stronger, mentally stronger, spiritually stronger than I gave myself credit for. But if I remained frightened, I wouldn't be. I would always be weak.
I think with your experience as well, phobias can be very strange things, and they can be triggered by the most minuscule of incidents. And often you'll see certain clips shared online about certain things. There's a very famous one that's been doing the rounds recently about that lady who's got a phobia of snowmen, who appeared on television a few years ago. But I've got people who are terrified of, like you, as you were saying, certain animals. I've got one person who absolutely hates sponges. You know, just a standard bass, and it makes you think often that there is a trigger point for these responses that is often locked away in people's psyche, that our brains are very good at protecting us from certain things like this, Alyson, that it tries to shield you from the damage that whatever incident may have caused such a particular fear or phobia. It tends to protect us, and sometimes we get to adulthood and we can't remember why that thing instills fear in us anymore. And I suppose with you using that experience working in hypnotherapy, going forwards with your spiritual pathway, is it a case of learning to understand yourself in regards to, as you were saying there, not realizing your own mental strength, that you've been able to look at other religions and pathways and practices to create a sort of way for you to navigate these challenges that you've come across in your life to get you where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, there has been that, but there's also been that other spiritual beings have come to me and made themselves known to me or helped me in some way. And that has also added to the pathway that I've been on. Because you were saying about, you know, I'm now a member of the Old Catholic and Apostolic Church. I'm a deacon with them. I'm going to be made a priest in July.
Fabulous.
Yeah. And I'm currently an exorcist. I've been an exorcist for some years now. I also was, as I said, like angels, for example, they would come and help me in certain situations. And Mary as well, the Virgin Mary, I was drawn to her. That's one particular reason why I was drawn to a Catholic faith, but I also knew that I had a calling to be a priest, and that in Roman Catholicism that wouldn't happen. Roman Catholic women who have been ordained as priests, and they have been, are excommunicated for that. So, and they go off to ordain other women priests. But I knew that wouldn't be necessarily a pathway for me. But I did find the Old Catholic and Apostolic Church who were quite happy for me to remain an exorcist. But I realised that Mary was a figure that is quite powerful. Not quite powerful, she's extremely powerful when it comes to defeating demons. And I had been drawn to her quite a lot over the years, and received encouragement, as it were, from her. So that was probably what led me down the pathway that I've gone down. It's just, it's something that has happened gradually over time. And I just feel that when doors start opening for you in a certain direction, go through them. Because, you know, when doors are closing in your face, it's not right for you. It's not right for you. And now what I'm doing is I'm going to be opening up a church called Our Lady of the Mystical Rose, which is going to focus on, well, there'll be the Mass, but there'll also be the Rosary and prophecy and healing. So I still feel that these things are important to my spirituality, and those are the things that I feel I've been given a calling to do. You know, so of course exorcism is a form of healing as well. People I think don't realise that, but I've been a healer for a long time. A lot longer than I've ever been an exorcist. Yes. I was doing healing it was actually when I was going to have my first kidney transplant that I was in my early 20s, and I bought a book on healing, and I practiced on my little dog. And then I would practice on other people, you know, like maybe in the family, you know, they would say they had a headache or something like that, and I would practice, and my dad liked me he didn't mind me doing that, and then he'd be like, that's amazing, that headache's gone, you know. And so I was doing that a lot, and then later on in the probably about 12 years ago, I did Reiki 1 and 2, and I used that a little bit. And as I used Reiki, my psychic awareness really kicked in. When I was doing Reiki, I was able to really see into people, like their emotion, like emotionally, spiritually, physically, what was going on with them. So even if I was given a healing for somebody on a physical level, I would be picking up what was emotionally wrong with them, and able to, you know, sit down with them and talk to them about that. But yeah, so that really kicked off the psychic awareness, and that was probably about 10 years ago.
I mean, I have heard you speak about when you were taking your step-first transplant, because it was a preemptive one as well, Alyson, wasn't it?
The second one was, yeah.
And you were noticing that you felt a bit more connected to the other side as the functionality of it began to fail. It's almost as if, as you've described it, you were closer to the veil than you would a normal person, and therefore you felt that this was allowing you to see far more than perhaps someone who was of full health would.
I think so, absolutely. It's probably the same reason why children are able to see more than adults is because they are, they're closer to that other side of, I guess if you believe in reincarnation, then they've been in that place before they were born, and I think that a lot of people who are ill start to see things and experience things. Yeah, I had some really, really strange things. Something that I don't think I mentioned in the book was hearing the banshee. I heard the banshee. Now, you don't ever want to hear that sound. It's awful.
Yes.
It is awful. It's terrifying. And I flew through the room from, it was like a long flat, so it just really had the bedroom and the living room and a hallway in between, toilet, shower room off of it, and then the kitchen was part of the living room. And I was through in the back bedroom and I heard this in the front room, and I flew through to see what it was. And of course, by that time it had stopped, but it was the most horrendous shriek that you've ever heard. And I'm convinced that was the banshee. Of course, when you hear the banshee, it usually denotes that somebody close by has died. And I can't say whether that was or wasn't the case. I don't know. But that was probably, and that happened round about that time when I was when I had kidney failure.
Yeah.
And then seeing the Hat Man, that was another one. Seeing the Hat Man at the side, I would just waking up, opening my eyes, and there's the Hat Man sitting beside your bed, sitting eye level with you, except he was turned away, but he was eye level with me.
Yeah.
That again, that was quite scary.
Yeah. I mean, I've always found the Hat Man experiences, because there are reports from all over the world, Alyson. This is not something that you can place in a particular cultural hotspot or whatever. And the thing that's always struck me is when people sceptically dismiss the Hat Man away as sleep paralysis. The thing that I can't come to terms with about an explanation is that, why are people seeing people in such old-fashioned garb? This is the thing that doesn't sit with me, because as anybody who grew up in the British Isles will say, you wouldn't see a picture before 1950 without men wearing suits and hats everywhere. They were everywhere. No gentleman would leave the house without a hat, especially if they were going out to a dance at a weekend or whatever, Alyson. They would always wear a hat, whether you lived in Devon or Dumfriesshire. Everybody would dress very similarly. And then they completely dropped out of fashion till probably 30 years ago. And now, of course, the most popular hat anybody would be seen to be wearing would probably be a baseball hat, or the flat cap is obviously quite popular. It's probably more popular than it's ever been. And yet, when people report the Hat Man, these aren't people wearing baseball caps and flat caps. These are people usually wearing a top hat or some kind of fedora even. These are old-fashioned hats. These are... And that's what's always struck me, because if people explain it away as saying, oh, well, it's just your brain repeating what you've seen, I find it hard to believe that we wouldn't have thousands of people claiming to have been seeing a baseball-wearing figure lurking around in their bedroom, rather than somebody wandering around wearing a top hat. Yeah,
well, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's associations with, like a baseball cap. Is a baseball cap scary? I don't know, but a top hat we could associate with somebody like Jack the Ripper, and that's quite scary.
Yeah.
The Hat Man that I saw, he had like a trilby.
Yes.
Like a trilby, sort of gangsterish. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which may or may not, I can't remember. I mean, sometimes that is in fashion, sometimes it's not. Yeah. I can't remember if it was in fashion at the time. I don't really know the answer to that, to be honest. But yeah, as you say, like, there's many different, hats that he's seen with. I have heard that people who are ill see him, and so that might have been more of a factor than anything, really.
I suppose as well, Alyson, it's one of those things that, what kind of propelled you towards learning how to become an exorcist? Because was that something that you had decided you needed to learn about and sort of give yourself the tools because of your personal experiences, or did you just think that that was the natural development for the way that you were increasing your knowledge in regards to different spiritual pathways going forwards?
I think it was a bit of both, actually. I had all the knowledge at my disposal, but also the thing that really propelled me was having an invading spirit that had been left in my house. And over the course of time, I would wake up, there would be scratching sounds, the things would be shaking, you know, the on the wall, the shelves would be shaking, bed shaking, you know, and then I woke up and I was being attacked by this invisible force that had me by the wrists. And it was after that I decided I'm going to do an exorcism in this flat. And that's what I did. And after the exorcism, I heard the sound of millions of hailstones on the ceiling. And this, I later found out, was the sound of the exorcism being a success, the energy leaving the place. And I didn't know any of these. All these things happened in a book called Begone Satan that I read after these events, but the priest in that book had the same things happen. The scratching sounds, the shaking shelves or whatever was shaking in the room, the attack, a psychic or a spiritual attack. And then after the exorcism, the sound of hailstones on the ceiling. I'd never heard this before. So because when this happened, I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at, I had two cats, and their eyes were bulging, looking at the ceiling.
Yes.
And I thought, right, this is not in my head.
Yes.
This is something is happening here. And as I say, it was like hailstone or static, that hailstone hitting off glass. It was that kind of sound. And I asked the woman upstairs, and no, there was nothing. And it was when I was then researching for a talk that I read Begone Satan and thought, wow, that's exactly what happened to me, is what happened to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was after that, as I say, that after that was the catalyst really for me being an exorcist. And I thought, right, well, I did that right.
Yeah.
So I guess that's that's a door being opened. See, that's what I view as being a door being open to me and saying, yes, you did that right. Therefore, that's something that you can do.
Yeah.
And if it's something that you can do and people are in the position where they don't know, and I've met people who are, really struggling with demonic attack, and nobody will help them. Not even the doctor.
Yeah.
They visited the doctor can't help them. In one case, the priest just told her to remove all the Buddhas in her house. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
That is not an answer, and that is not helpful. In another case, the minister, who was lovely, and I met him, but he just didn't know what to do. He'd never come across anything like that before. So he didn't know what to do. And I was the first person to help this woman.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing thing, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
And it's just, it really strikes me as being something that, people could help, but they don't. They don't. And we're hearing all the time that there's a shortage of priests and there's a shortage of exorcists, to do these things. But there's not. There's not, because there are women lining up to be priests, and well, I don't know if people always feel it's their calling to be an exorcist, but just by me asking about a case down in England, and I've asked a few priests down there, just the act of me asking that has made them think, well, no, I'm not, but I tell you what, you've got my interest now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm going to go and research that and find out all the ins and outs about it and see if I can do that. Mm. And then by doing that, then they can help somebody.
Yeah.
They can help heal somebody, because, as I say, it's all about healing. It's a spiritual disease, you know, and if somebody is under possession, it's a spiritual disease, and it's possible to help them. So why shouldn't we?
Do you think even for people of faith, Alyson, the term exorcism has become a byword for fear, or it's just got so many connotations because of the cultural portrayal of an exorcism and what it entails, that it's a real battle for the soul of the alleged possessed person, that people view it as being the worst possible scenario, whereas when you look at the actual body of evidence across religious teachings and the cases, it's the minute cases that refer to, as you were saying about the Exorcist book that you were given. You know, it's the few cases that make the headlines, whereas the vast majority of exorcisms, you say, are, without wishing to sound as if I'm giving these a kind of scorecard, but the vast majority are sort of low-level possessions where people are not, you know, speaking in tongues and writhing around their beds. They are spiritually possessed, and they need to be cleansed, but it's certainly not to the extreme levels there is often portrayed in the media.
Possibly not. In the case that I'm dealing with, it is quite a severe case, but I think what is assumed is that it's an overnight, you know, cure. An exorcism's an overnight cure, and that's not the case. Sometimes it takes repeated exorcisms or other spiritual help. Yeah. Attending church, for example, is just to find some connection with the divine. And this is why I started Glasgow Pilgrims, going round on a pilgrimage round all different churches, Protestant, Catholic, Episcopal, and Methodist, that's another one, to help like anybody who wants to try to connect with the divine, if they can. And that, because that's part of it, that's part of the cure. And, you know, not everybody is able to do that on their own. And you just have to find what works for that person, you know, what's right for them, regardless of what my religion is. And I really don't like to try to convert anybody. That's not why I'm doing the Glasgow Pilgrim thing. It's just to, you know, you don't have to be a Christian to connect to God. So, and I'm reluctant to try to make anybody see things through my eyes and follow the same religion that I'm in. That's not what I'm about. I'm just about their spiritual welfare, however that might come. You know, God knows the answer for them, as far as I'm concerned, not me. So if I can try to help them in that way, that's my job.
Do you think that's one of the preconceived problems, that if you're not a Catholic you can't seek help from an exorcist, Alyson, as you refer to there? You know, if they're Protestant or they're even a spiritualist, that unless they are a Catholic or convert to Catholicism, that they can't seek help from an exorcism. Whereas I think it seems to be, once again, it becomes a cliche, as you say there, that I think it's all about a cross-pollination. And if you've got people of different denominations under the same banner, essentially, then if you can't help them, then surely you should have that network of people that you can liaise with and talk to and see what create. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And I think the traditional methods are sometimes so overpowering that people just presume the wrong thing.
I don't know. I've not spoken to anyone apart from in one church It was the United Free Church of Scotland. Mm. And that was the minister that hadn't known what to do, but went along to one of his services, which was really good. I really enjoyed it. And when he came across and I was introduced, he said, "Oh yes, you're the one that likes to kick Satan's butt." He was so friendly. So although he didn't know how to do it, he appreciated that I did.
Your reputation precedes you, Alyson.
Yes, it would seem so. It would seem so. Yeah, I mean, in other churches do have ministers who, or priests who do similar. In the Church of Scotland, they do deliverance ministry. Mm. And in the Episcopal Church, they have some kind of deliverance healing section. Mm. So they do have these things set up, but it's probably rarely that they're asked. I mean, it's not something that happens all the time. Mm. And some people who are... There's this thing that the confusion between the psychological and the demonic, yes, the spiritual attack, and which is it? And the thing is that these beings can take advantage of somebody who is mentally unwell, or they can cause mental illness as well. And you can treat the spiritual, like a priest or a minister can treat the spiritual aspect of it. Somebody else has to deal with the psychological. That's not our job. So it might be a two-man job. So I would say that the more important relationship would be between the doctors and the exorcist. Because sometimes it takes two to get the right ingredients together to help the person. That's not in every case, but in some cases, if somebody had something, say like schizophrenia, which is quite often associated with demonic possession, and well, it might be that there's both problems, and if a priest come along and did an exorcism and got rid of the spirit, that still leaves the schizophrenia. That's the thing that still has to be treated. So I think sometimes you have to treat things on several fronts to help the person. Yeah. Yeah. But it shouldn't be, as quite often is missed out, is the spiritual side of it. You know.
Yeah. Do you think that's the problem as well, that sometimes if someone claims to be possessed, Alyson, people think, well, they must be suffering from some mental illness, and they don't think that it's two things concurrent, as you say there, because I think some people would be quite surprised for someone with your religious background to utilise the medical profession to run at the same time, as you say, because you could be dealing with two different things that, yes, they may be leaking into each other, but they're not necessarily neither of them are going to cure the other one. Both have to be done in tandem.
Yeah. I do prefer that they have asked a doctor or had some kind of counselling or psychotherapy or something like that from a professional who deals with that. But if that's not forthcoming, then I'm not going to turn them away, because, as I say, what I do is healing as well. And, I'm reminded of the words of Father Gabriele Amort, the Pope's exorcist.
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen the film. Have you seen the film?
Not yet. I've had some very varying reviews, Alyson, I have to say.
Oh, I love it. I really love it. I really do. It's a fantastic film. There's some really good comic moments in it too. But Father Amort said that no unnecessary exorcism harms anyone. So they're still given a form of healing. They're still being prayed over. They're still getting rid of any anxiety. And even if they don't have a possessing spirit, you're still helping them in some way. You know, whether it's psychological or not, you know, you still help them. I do.
Have you found people are more open to discussing it without sort of talking about it in hushed tones in the modern era, Alyson? It seems to have been something that obviously was massive in the 70s and 80s, and with the greatest respect, there are certain individuals that have taken advantage of those situations over the years for their own either personal gain or as you say, some would suggest recruitment or converting people across to their version of what they wish people to believe in. And yet, for me, I think having an interest in the paranormal and the supernatural and the spiritual for all of my adult life, I can't remember a time where it seems to be more balanced in a discussion than it is these days. I think it seems to have got rid of a lot of the old sort of dogmatic preconceptions that used to be attached to it, it would seem.
I think it depends where you're discussing it, you know, because I've seen me being like out and about and somebody's asking me what, you know, I go to Slimming World, right? I've lost 2 stones. I just want to make that known.
Congratulations. Well done, you.
Thank you. And I was talking to somebody and she was saying, where's your church, you know, and what kind of church is it, and blah, blah, blah. And I was explaining about the Old Catholic and Apostolic Church, and some priests feel called to do something, you know, some maybe help build houses in Africa or rescue gays from jail, because over there they are jailed, unfortunately, or feed the homeless on the streets or something like that. And I said, I feel called to be, I'm an exorcist. But I said it in a very, I'm an exorcist. You know, like with the hand up at the mouth. And because it's more because like you're not in a place where you're talking about, you know, you're not at a paranormal conference where you're talking openly about things like this. You're in Slimming World and you're not, you know, you don't want to scare the person at the next in the next seat to you. You know, quite often the reaction, depending on who you're talking to, is you get the crossed fingers in your face. And I'm thinking, I'm the good guy.
Yeah.
Why are you giving me the crossed fingers? You know?
In case you've got one in your pocket, you want to throw it on him.
I know.
Yeah. Yes, you failed your target this week, Sandra. Have a demon.
I know. That's it. You've had too many sins.
Yeah, now have a big one.
And now have a big one. You've sinned too much.
Yeah. Here's Beelzebub. Take him home for a week.
So,
yeah. See how your sin count is next week.
Oh, yeah. Oh, dear me.
Yeah. Well, they may discuss these things because there's a few places around mine that do slimming worlds, and they're all in church halls.
Yes,
so if you do one there, you should be on sacred ground. You should be all right to discuss that.
That's right. You? Yeah. Well, you would think. you get more hushed tones as well for just wearing the collar. You know, when you walk into somewhere, like, oh God, the minister's in. You know, this kind of thing. You just see the eyes. Or walking into a restaurant for about 2 minutes. Everything goes quiet. It just goes quiet. People stop speaking. And then the buzz starts again, you know. Yeah. But for a few minutes.
Yeah. Everybody's checking themselves. They're all like, right.
Everybody's like, all the eyes are darting around, you know, and sort of looking at, you know, each other like, oh, you watch what you're saying, you know.
Yeah. Hiding the wine behind the menu.
Yeah. Or the Bible juice, as I call it.
I suppose as well, Alyson, reading your book, as people would be surprised as well, as you mentioned earlier on, some of the encounters you've had with otherworldly beings and strange objects in the sky. Was that something, even with your experience, as you were saying, of dealing with an incubus and some of the experiences that you had and the family background that you had, was that a field that you thought you would end up being aware of or having an experience of? Or is it one of those that you can now look back and think, well, I've had everything else, nothing surprises me?
I think it's the latter, really, but I suppose SPI Scotland, when I went into that, the majority of people, I would say, are interested in UFOs. And really that is why we went out and started doing night watches and sky watches and things like that.
Yeah.
It's not top of my list for things to be interested in. But nevertheless, I have seen UFOs, and I've been surprised by the fact that there was an incubus connection, a UFO connection with the incubus attack. That surprised me. Just today, actually, somebody posted something about John Keel had said. So what John Keel said in Operation Trojan Horse, it's 1996, was the UFOs do not seem to exist as tangible, manufactured objects. They do not conform to natural laws of our environment. The thousands of contacts with the entities indicates that they are liars and put-on artists. The UFO manifestations seem to be, by and large, merely minor variations of the age-old demonological phenomenon. And when I read that, because I didn't know that he had said that, or if I did, I'd forgotten. When I read that, I thought that's exactly what I've described in my book. It's exactly what I've described.
Yeah.
Is I had a demonic attack, and there was a UFO that imploded above my flat in the same month as that attack. And I can't give dates, so I can't 100% marry it up. But I'm convinced, because of the colour that was seen and the colour that I saw, it sounds like the same phenomenon was happening there.
Well, Keel was a very interesting person in regards to his personal transformation, as it were, Alyson, that the one thing he hated to be considered was a ufologist. And I think he got so fed up with it. Obviously, he famously pointed the finger and said, this is all some kind of cosmic joke that somebody's having on us. Because he like you've said in that quote there, he just couldn't understand the lack of tangible, graspable evidence. It just seemed as though they were made of smoke. They'd disappear in your fingers when you reached for them. Yeah. And rather than becoming frustrated and believing that it was all nonsense, he began to realise that there was far more to this, and obviously came up famously with numerous other terms. I mean, some people consider me a Keelian these days. That I consider that there is a far wider scope to Fortean events than just pigeonholing everything. But I don't think that doesn't necessarily mean that everything is connected, but there certainly is more connections to certain phenomena than I think people are willing to admit or be open to. And it's always interesting even when we talk about strange subjects and strange phenomena, be people into the paranormal or creatures or UFOs, there seems a line of believability that even the most ardent investigator of those particular phenomena will not cross. And if their experiencer starts mentioning strange things or aspects of it that doesn't make sense, they go, I'm not really sure I want to hear anymore, even though that's what they're into. Because even with their alleged open-mindedness, they've got a bias that they're not willing to entertain things that may seem outside of their particular toolbox, as it were. Yeah.
I think everybody's got their, what they're comfortable with, what they're comfortable with believing.
Yes.
And that applies to even me. Yeah. There are things that I just think, But the longer that I've gone on in this community, the more I've realised that, maybe I'm being a bit prejudiced with certain things. Like one of the things was reptilians, and it's not been anything that's ever interested me before. It's been something that I've thought was a bit of a joke, or people were needing psychiatric evaluation. And I've met people who have had experiences of reptilians, and there's nothing wrong with them psychologically, and they're very nice people.
Yes.
Who are very down to earth and very straight talking, but they've had these experiences. And I think, well, I've experienced strange things, so why shouldn't they have experienced strange things?
Yeah.
And then the other side of that is there's a lot of people who are into the alien subject who decry anything to do with demonology, anything to do with demonic experience or demonic belief. They think is ridiculous, and they ridicule it. And you think, you're in the UFO community. Check yourself.
Yes.
Check yourself and your beliefs, and what is so ridiculous about my beliefs in comparison to your beliefs. And so I suppose we all kind of have to check ourselves sometimes, really, and think, I know that sounds insane on the face of it, but that's not to say that it is. Even like people that I know who have experienced fairies, they've seen fairies. Now there's another thing that, you see ridiculed on some alien pages, people still believe in fairies and angels and demons and these ridiculous things, and you think, well, you believe in reptilians and Bigfoot and greys and whatever else it might be. We all believe in different things, and in this community we all believe in strange things. That's what we have in common, and we do have that in common.
Yes, it is remarkable sometimes. I think sometimes as well, when you look at that, it's the age-old argument, Alyson. It's science versus faith. Even if we're talking about incredible things, it's still nuts and bolts versus theology. There is this constant battle, even in the world of the weird, that that can't be real. Demons. And it's funny, I remember the Netflix documentary series that came out recently, where they were talking about 4 specific UFO cases, and one of them touched on the Broadhaven one from Wales. And obviously, since I've done this show, I've become extremely aware of the amount of people that have and still do report encounters with what we would consider the Fae, which is something I wouldn't have given the time of day to 5 years ago. So is how little I actually knew then, Alyson. And so it was interesting to me looking at both the Fae discussions and the UFO discussions, where the Fae discussions were pointing out that, in their opinion, what these people had seen weren't aliens. They'd encountered the Fae, even though none of the witnesses had said anything like that and didn't give any kind of indication of that. The believers in their particular field were convinced that the witnesses must be wrong. And you see that all the time, that whether you're talking about Bigfoot or UFOs or the Fae or ghosts or demons, depending on where you're coming at, you will always find people who will believe that whatever the witness is saying, they don't understand what they've experienced, which I find is the opposite way to deal with a witness experience. You should be looking at it from their point of view.
Their point of view, yeah.
And even though you claim to be open-minded, by being in that kind of sort of aggressive investigatory standpoint, you're showing a complete bias that overrides anything that the witness may wish to share with you, surely.
Definitely, yeah. And the witness knows that, and they'll hold back from you. They'll hold back evidence from you if you show them that. Yeah, absolutely. I was going
to say, I suppose as well, this is one of the things about the wonderful Scottish Paranormal and UFO conferences that you're a key organiser of. Not that, how many plates do you need, Alyson? you always have a wide variety of topics. So how did you get involved in formulating these and promoting them? Because obviously you've spoken at quite a lot of them as well. Was it something very dear to your heart, or were you just a speaker or somebody that was interested that then got roped into organising it? Or did you start at the bottom and say, right, we want to do something?
Yeah, well, I was and still do run SPI Scotland.
Yes.
And Malcolm was down in England and Ron's up here, and we'd all been wanting to put on a conference, and nothing seemed to be happening. And I said, are we going to do this? I really wanted to do it. And so we just found a venue, began asking people if they wanted to speak, and put it together. That was it, and that was in 2015, and we're still going this year. So this is the ninth year. Well, we did have to cancel 2020 because of COVID. In 2021 we did it online.
Yes.
But yeah, it's been going on since 2015, and it's bigger and better every year. It's great. It really is. And the such a diverse amount of topics and knowledge, and we try to get as many different things as possible for people. And of course, we allow ourselves to speak because we're the organisers, so we get
You're the headliners, yes.
We get to give our annual talk. It's maybe a bit unfair us taking a speaker space, but that's the privilege of being the organiser. That's the payoff. Payoff.
Yeah. Well, it's 3 less guests to find as well, isn't it?
Well, that is very true. That is very true.
So I suppose as well, one of the challenges, Alyson, is obviously because you've been doing it so long. Do you struggle to find a different subject to tackle, or do you think, oh, well, this is what interests me currently? Because I'm always interested when you're a regular speaker at a regular event. Yeah. I suppose when you look back at some of the topics you covered, you have covered a wide variety over the years.
Yeah. Like last year was unholy homicides. So it was murders that had taken place that people had done for their god or for a demon or something like that. Obviously the link is there with myself and being an exorcist. So that was my topic last year. But yeah, so there are so many different things to speak about, that I don't think it's whatever I am interested in knowing more about at that time, because then that's helpful to me to know about that. So just now I'm researching on psychic self-defense, attack and defense, because that is helping me with healing somebody. That's helping me to help someone else by finding out as much as I can about that subject, and then passing that information to an audience and telling them what they can do as well. And it's just, for me, that kind of thing is spreading some goodness in a much needed, in this world. It's much needed to spread that goodness and that those tools to combat these evil forces that are damaging the world. And it might be in ways that you don't necessarily view as demonic, but there are lots of evil acts out there, and we see it every day in the newspaper. And those evil energies build up, and they have to go somewhere, and quite often they form, into something that can then attack.
Yeah.
So just by passing out that information, giving people that knowledge, they'll then be in a better place to know what to do if that happens to them.
I mean, you get caught on the back foot. I know there's that lovely story you tell in the book where, was it the conference, where someone gave you a present, and it was one of those presents that you think, why on earth would somebody give me this when you opened it up? Because then it just relayed back into something from your past in regards to this lovely gift of was it a pocket watch?
It was a pocket watch, and it was the 2018 conference, and we were having a lot of problems at that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I had asked my uncle, who's in spirit, to help, because he had given me a message at a spiritualist church. He'd given me a message. He'd actually transfigured. The medium had transfigured into my Uncle Bill. It was my Uncle Bill talking to me. He was walking like him, and he had a very distinctive walk. And he actually said, I don't mean to make fun of anybody, but this is how he's walking. And he started walking like him.
Yeah.
And it was my Uncle Bill up there. He was just dead a week. And he told me that, he said, you don't like praying, which has obviously changed. But he said, if you ever need to pray, you can pray to me and I'll try to help. So at that conference, I put out a thought to him and I said, please, can you help to protect this conference? Make sure nothing happens today. Nothing bad happens. And this relates back to the day of his funeral, when my dad, who had been given a pocket watch by my Uncle Bill, it was an old one, it never worked. Yeah. Until the day of his funeral. And then it started ticking. And my dad brought it through, just before the funeral. He said, this watch started ticking. It's your Uncle Bill's. And then after the funeral, it stopped ticking and it never ever ticked again. And so after I put out that thought to please help protect this conference, Uncle Bill, or give me a sign that it will be okay, this man came up to me and said, I have a present for you. And I opened it and there was this pocket watch. So that was, it was totally out the blue. I still have that. It was actually a Doctor Who pocket watch. It had because I was a Doctor Who fan, and it had the circles on the back that symbolised the Doctor Who symbol, which was something that I'd also I don't know if I'd mentioned this in the book, but it's something that also related to the Hat Man. Was because the Doctor likes to wear hats. Yeah. And this I sort of put together as being, the Hat Man had appeared and appears when people are ill, as the Doctor would appear when people are ill, so there's this sort of, is this a healing aspect, or is this somebody who's come to basically fetch you to the other side? Is that a possibility? Yeah, so the guy gave me a pocket watch, and that nothing bad happened that day.
Good.
That was good. And somebody else said that just last year that as soon as I'd walked in, it was like there was this dome of protection. She felt this dome of protection over the whole conference. And I said, I wonder if that's my Uncle Bill. Yeah. Maybe he's still doing it. Maybe he's still helping to protect the conference. Oh. Which is a lovely thought.
It is. Oh. Yeah. Good. And I think especially at that particular conference, that was probably the sign you needed that you'd done the right thing and everything was going to be all right for you, Alyson, as well.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. That we were kind of plagued with bad luck for that conference. And we didn't even know if it was going to go ahead. Yeah. We'd been stopped at so many points, and with 3 weeks to go, our venue cancelled. It cancelled us, and then with 3 days to go, our new venue cancelled it. Well, was going to cancel us, and obviously we had the likes of Peter Robbins coming over from the States. Yeah. It's, money for his airfare and his accommodation, and and other speakers being banned from speaking, and by the venue not by us, by the venue. And it just was, it was quite a headache. The whole thing was quite a headache, and you just didn't know which way it was going to go.
Yeah.
You really didn't. And the whole day I sort of felt, now this wasn't the case, but the whole day I just felt everyone looking was hating me. You know, the whole day I felt.
Yeah. And
it wasn't the case at all. But I was glad to see the end of that conference. I really was. I really was. I collapsed in a heap when I got in that night. I really did. And it wasn't good. Yeah. But it's been great ever since.
Yeah.
It's been great ever since. And we have a good lot of speakers. You know, I suppose I should tell you a bit about it actually this year. The first person we've got is Karen Strang, and she's talking about cunning haar, and it's all about the magic of painting. She's a visual artist, and she is, I think, is going to be talking about things like witchcraft within her painting, and the landscape, the pagan landscape, is quite often involved in her paintings. Well, I've told you myself I'm going to be talking about psychic attack and self-defence. Gordon Rutter, he's going to be talking about frightening flora, tales of plants, but not the nice medicinal or pretty ones. No, it's the turn of the nasty ones to get their chance in the spotlight. These examples will be taken from folklore and fiction, with some frightful factual flowers for good luck. So that's what he's talking about. Then Ron is going to be talking about ancient aliens, including things like the pyramids of ancient Egypt, if they were constructed by other beings, as people have speculated. Could we be descendants of aliens? All that kind of stuff. Linda Whiteford is going to be talking about the ghosts of Kouros. And this is a gorgeous little place in Scotland, and if you've not visited it, I strongly suggest that you do, because it is absolutely gorgeous. And she works there in Kouros Palace. So she's going to be talking about there's lots of ghost stories and countless paranormal investigations that she's done, and she communicates with the spirits in Kouros Palace. So she's going to be telling us all about that. Malcolm is going to be talking about UFOs in Scotland. I think he'll discuss things like the A70 UFO incident and the Craiglusker and Polmont Reservoir case, all the usual ones. And I'm really interested to hear this next speaker, Alan Murdy.
Oh, yes, from the Ghost Club.
Yeah, he's going to talk about the mystery of the White Lady ghosts. Many hauntings involve a ghost who's traditionally female, but alongside these, there stands one particular and recurrent type of apparition, a class known internationally as the White Lady. These White Ladies appear as anonymous apparitions, appearing in a fixed and emblematic form. Typically, she's a phantom of a woman who appears in white or pale clothing, who seems to manifest in rural rather than urban and domestic settings, quite often frequently seen standing beside or on or even crossing a road or materialising at remote and isolated spots. And the reason that I'm interested to hear what he says is because that sounds very much like the Our Lady apparitions, like Fatima.
Yeah.
A sort of a ghostly lady dressed in white in a rural location.
Yes.
Giving that information that she gave. So I'm interested to hear if you'll speak about Our Lady at all. That will be interesting. And of course, Ian Shanes, my very own husband, is going to be there, and he's a psychic medium, and he's going to be giving free readings throughout the day. So then we've got stalls and raffle prizes, and just we've got it all going. We really do. It's a great day, and I look forward to it every year. It's worth the hard work. Sometimes it is a lot of hard work, but it's worth it. And throughout the day you get to speak to the most amazing people, and people come up and they tell you things that they've never told anyone else. And you get to have a conversation with them about it. One guy, he was telling me about how an angel had saved him from drowning when he was about 10, and he'd fallen off his bike into the canal. And when he looked, there was no one there, but somebody had encouraged him to get out of the water, and there was no one there. And he said, and this guy was in his 70s, well into his 70s. And he said, I've never told anyone that. And he says, and I feel so much better having shared it. And I thought, that poor man has been going about for like 60 years. And never told anybody that amazing story. So it's things like that you get to experience, and then everybody's got their own thing that they're talking about, and that people know that you're interested in. So if somebody has got a demon story, they'll come and talk to me. If somebody's got a UFO story, they'll go and talk to Malcolm or Ron. And it's great because we get our research and our knowledge base gets extended just from those conversations, and making those new friends. It's marvellous. I love it.
Yes, it sounds like a great day out for everybody. So as I said earlier, you have been on my bucket list for quite a while. I will have to head north of the border and join you.
Oh, I hope you do. That would be lovely.
So I'll put links to that in the show notes so people can get tickets and find out further information. But obviously, before I let you go, where can everybody find a copy of the book, Alyson, and keep up to date with it?
It's on Amazon. It's called Mystic Visions, and you can get it on Amazon. If you come to the conference, you can get it from me, and I can sign your copy for free, I also give a little discount, so there's that to encourage people along, I have a website, my own website, revalyson.dunlop-shanes.com, and that's Alyson Dunlop-Shanes. So if you have any problems, just like with a search on Amazon, which I don't see that you will do, but you can certainly get it from my website, or if you just want to take a wee look at my website, you can do that and find out more about the Glasgow Pilgrims and all the mystical stuff that I'm doing, making my own rosary beads now.
Marvellous.
This is one that I'm wearing just now. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, yeah, lovely.
It is one of my own.
Marvellous.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I'll put links to everything in the show notes for the conference, your website, and where they can get the book on Amazon. And I just want to say thank you so much for a lovely conversation and taking so much time to spend in my company. Thank you, Alyson.
Thank you very much.